a group of key players, farmers, restaurant owners, businesses, all of these folks coming together and basically taking over the program. And that takes time to put something like that together. So that is a program that is viable and sustainable for the future. That is the intent of this paragraph.
If you turn the tab to the next exhibit, which will be Fence Exhibit 68. Ms. Shaum, is that an email from you to Joey Preston dated November 3rd, 2008?
Yes.
Does it reference the conference that you had over the past weekend?
Yes.
And does it indicate whether the conference was a success or not?
It does.
And was it a success?
Yes.
Shaum, what conversations did you have with Mr. Preston about his employment dispute with Anderson County?
None.
What conversations did you have with Mr. Preston about his severance agreement?
None.
What conversations did you have with Mr. Preston about proposed resolutions of Mr. Preston's employment dispute in this snapshot in time of November 2008?
None.
What conversations did you have with your father about the amendment to the second contract?
None.
And what conversations did you have with your father about potential negotiations under the second contract?
None.
And Ms. Shaum, what conversations with Mr. Preston was your father a party to about the second PAC contract?
None.
What financial benefit did your father receive under the second PAC contract?
None.
What financial benefit did you receive, Ms. Shaum, under Mr. Preston's severance agreement?
None.
What relationship, if any, existed between the amendment to your contract with the county and Mr. Preston's severance agreement?
None.
Shaum, I know that it was somewhat of a hardship for you to be here this morning. I really appreciate you coming to trial, and I appreciate your time to answer any questions that my opposing counsel may have.
Thank you, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Ms. Shaum. Did you speak with Mr. Preston in preparing for your testimony here today?
No.
Did you speak with Mr. Preston's lawyers in preparation for your testimony here today?
Yes.
How long did you spend with him?
20 minutes?
You graduated from Bob Jones University in 1998, is that correct?
Yes.
And during college, you worked part-time at an interior decorating company in Greenville, is that right?
Yes.
That was a company called Griffin and Associates?
Yes.
How much were you paid per hour for your work during college?
I can't remember. It was part-time. I don't know.
Roughly, any idea?
$10 an hour?
And then during the summers while you were at Bob Jones University, you spent the time taking summer classes, is that fair?
Yes.
You did not work
During the summer?
during the summer.
No.
Other than the part-time work you did with Griffin and Associates, you didn't work as a general matter while you attended Bob Jones, is that fair?
Yes.
And after you graduated from Bob Jones in 1998, you were staying home and raising your family?
Yes.
For about a year.
Yes.
How many of your 4 children did you have back in 1998?
1.
And then you had 3 others in some period of time after that, fair to say?
Yes.
You worked for a company called Cell Chemical for about a year and a half, is that right?
Yes.
And you were doing general office work for them?
Yes.
How much were you paid per hour, by the hour for them? Roughly.
Probably the same, $10.
And after you worked for Cell Chemical for a period of time, you went to work for Jervy I Group for about 2 years working in their accounts payable department, is that fair?
Yes.
And how much were you paid per hour working for them?
Probably anywhere from $13 to $15 an hour.
And then after your time with the Jervy I Group, you became a case manager for Southern Legal Resources Center from about 2001 until about 2007.
Yes.
And Southern Legal Resources Center handled civil rights cases involving freedom of speech. Is that fair?
Yes.
As a general matter, they defended people who displayed Confederate symbols and were forced to remove them.
Yes.
You worked for the Southern Legal Resources Center out of your home, correct?
Yes.
And how much were you paid per hour for them?
Probably the same,
About
13 to 15, something like that.
And that takes you up until 2007 when you formed the company PAC. Is that fair?
Yes.
In about 2002, you moved to your residence in Woodruff,
Yes.
and that's where you live now?
Yes.
Your house is on a couple of acres within a larger farm, is that fair?
Yes.
The larger farm is called Live Oak Farm, is that right?
Yes.
And that's about an 80-acre farm?
Yes.
That farm and your house are located in Spartanburg County, are they not?
Yes.
And the farm was owned in part by your father, is that fair?
No.
Back then, it was not?
No.
Would you agree with me that your parents, Ron and Cassie Wilson, had an interest in the farm back then?
Yes.
And for some period of time, your father ran Live Oak Farm, is that right?
No.
There was no point in time when your father ran the farm?
What do you mean by ran the farm?
Well, did he have any day-to-day operational involvement in how the farm was run at any point in time?
Yes.
You had no experience with farming before about 2003, is that fair?
Yes.
And your work at Live Oak Farm, to the extent you did any, was principally to manage their store at some point in time, is that fair?
The store was not up at that point. We were busy building our livestock numbers, so to speak, processing animals, selling them in different markets with restaurants and at the farmer's market, and busy getting our name out there.
So that was primarily marketing work, is that fair? That you were doing?
No, I was helping.
You were helping with the
Yes.
processing of animals and all that? Would you agree that, and you didn't get paid for your work on the farm, is that fair?
Yes.
You agree that on August 15, 2007, that's the day you started packing, is that right?
If that's the date you have, I don't have the paperwork in front of me,
I
but
think I can show you, I'll show you an exhibit from the deposition that might help you refresh your memory. I think I've got it on the screen, that might be the fastest way to show it to you. What I'm going to try to show you is just articles of incorporation, and I'll show you the last page, which is the one that matters. You know, think we can blow up a little piece of this. I don't know if you can read that from there, Ms. Shaum, but
Yes.
you agree that that's your signature on the document?
Yes.
And that's on August 15, 2017?
Yes.
Does that help you remember when you formed PAC? Would you agree then that you formed PAC on August 15, 2007?
Yes.
Before you started this company, would you agree with me that you had never been compensated for any work in the field of agriculture?
Yes.
And before you started this company, you had never earned more than $15 an hour for any employer, is that right?
Yes.
You had no formal education in agricultural fields, isn't that right?
No.
That's
No,
not correct.
I mean, it determines what you call an education. I mean, getting out there and doing the work, you learn real quick what to do and what not to do.
And that work happened after 2003. You're on the job
Yes.
farm work, correct?
Yes.
But you agree that you had no formal education
Yes.
in any agricultural field, correct? In fact, your degree in college was pre-law.
Yes.
And you had attended, at the time you formed PAC, the sum total of your formal education, if you want to call it that, was three-day conferences put on by the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. Is that right?
Yes.
And the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, that's CFSA.
Yes.
That's the association that you were talking about with Mr. Davis that put on a conference in October of 2008 in Anderson County, correct?
Yes.
So that's not your organization, is it?
No.
In fact, that's an organization that had existed long before PAC ever came to be.
Yes.
And they had been putting on conferences throughout the state of South Carolina long before PAC ever came to be.
North of state of South Carolina.
They had been putting on conferences
In North Carolina.
in North Carolina, right?
Yes.
Long before PAC ever came to be.
Yes.
And so your involvement in the conference that CFSA ultimately had in Anderson County was simply to try to lobby to get them to hold their conference in Anderson County. Would you agree?
Yes.
They were going to have the conference anyway,
Yes.
just didn't know where.
Right.
You formed PAC, which you agreed, so that you could do agricultural consulting work,
Yes.
and the customer you had in mind when you formed PAC was Anderson County, correct?
Yes.
And your father, Ron Wilson, was a county council member for Anderson County at the time you formed PAC.
Yes.
Fair? At the time you formed PAC, you agreed that you did not contact any county in South Carolina to inquire about doing consulting work except for Anderson County. Is that fair?
Yes.
Not even Spartanburg County, where your farm was located, correct?
No.
And as of the time of your deposition in this case, which took place in January of 2011, would you agree with me that PAC had not done any consulting work for any customer other than Anderson County?
Yes.
Is that right? And I think I've heard your testimony on this, but before you contacted Anderson County to seek consulting work from it, you said you never discussed it with your father. Is that right?
Yes.
And you never talked to your father about any attempt by you to engage in a contract with Anderson County. Is that fair?
Yes.
And I believe your testimony would be that your father knew nothing about your attempt to get consulting work from Anderson County back in 2007. Is that fair?
Yes.
You contacted Mr. Preston at some point to try to get the consulting work. Fair enough?
Yes.
How did you know to contact Mr. Preston?
I went on the county website and looked to see who the administrator was.
Had you ever heard of Mr. Preston before that?
No.
Not even from your father?
No.
Do you know how long your father had been a county councilman at that point in time, roughly?
No.
And would it be fair to say you met with Mr. Preston sometime before September 4th of 2007, September 14th, the date of the first contract signing, right?
Yes.
And you made a presentation at Sullivan's, we talked about that. And at the time you met with Mr. Preston, you did not tell him you were Ron Wilson's daughter, is that true?
Yes.
Any reason you think he should have known that at the time?
No.
Did you ever tell him you were Ron Wilson's daughter?
No.
At the presentation you made on behalf of PAC, you were presenting information on various projects you thought could help Anderson County grow the agricultural sector. Is that fair?
Yes.
And some of your main points were the farm to school program. Is that right?
Yes.
increasing the number of CSAs in the county,
Yes.
and then opening relations between farmers and restaurants. At the time you were hired by Anderson County back in 2007 under this PAC contract, you agreed that you had never worked with a farm-to-school program before, isn't that right?
There weren't any in South Carolina.
So fair to say you had never worked with one before.
Right.
And CSA, would you agree with me, that means community supported agriculture? Is that what CSA stands for?
Yes.
And your farm in Spartanburg County, that was not a CSA, was it?
No.
At the time you were hired by Anderson County, you had never worked directly with the CSA, isn't that right?
Yes.
And you had never helped start a CSA before, isn't that right?
Yes.
You did not belong to any CSA organizations back then, did you?
No.
Your experience with CSAs back in 2007, when Mr. Preston hired you, was your attendance at maybe 2 workshops about it, isn't that right?
Yes.
And at the time you were hired by Mr. Preston for the PAC contract, you had never worked before to connect farms to restaurants, had you?
Besides our own farm.
So that's the only one.
Yes.
And part of what you did for your own farm was to try to sell produce or products to restaurants?
Yes.
Other than that, you had never worked to connect any other farm to any restaurant, fair enough?
I was busy enough with our own.
And after your presentation, Mr. Preston told you he wanted to hire PAC, isn't that right?
Yes.
So you sent him the proposal? Isn't that right? You sent
Yes.
the proposal. Okay. Now, in the proposal, wouldn't you agree that you initially identified an hourly rate of $20 an hour?
Yes.
That was your idea?
Yes.
At this point in time, $20 an hour was more than you had ever earned on an hourly basis, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, if you look at, I'm going to jump to exhibit number 76, which I think you have in front of you in your binder. We agree that exhibit 76, you agree, is the first contract you had with Anderson County dated September 4, 2007?
Yes.
You said you drafted that contract, is that right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that you had never drafted a contract before?
Yes.
Did you have any help whatsoever in coming up with the language to be included in this contract?
No.
And this is a contract that was signed off on by Mr. Preston, correct?
Yes.
You look at the first 2 paragraphs under the bullet point number 2, called the services, on the first page. This contract, for the very first sentence, provides that you shall or shall ensure that its employees shall perform the services on Appendix 1, correct?
Yes.
So this contemplates that it doesn't have to be just Ms. Shaum that does the work. You could hire employees to do the work as well. Fair enough?
Yes.
Did you ever hire anybody to do the work that you needed to do under the PAC contract?
No.
So you did it all yourself in the end.
Yes.
You testified with Mr. Davis a little bit about the fact that you ultimately, or that the $20 an hour rate was ultimately increased in part because you were afraid you needed help to get the work done. Isn't that right?
Yes.
But you never needed anybody else besides yourself, did you?
No.
And the contract ended up including a rate of $65 an hour. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And that was a figure that Mr. Preston came up with, isn't it?
No.
You said in your direct testimony, if I is correct, that part of the reason you needed to increase the amount was because you thought you might need help doing the work. Is that right?
Yes.
And because you needed health insurance.
Sorry.
And because you needed health insurance.
Yes.
Do you know if Anderson County typically provides health insurance for independent contractors? Do you know one way or another?
I don't.
And the jump from $20 an hour to $65 an hour is an increase of $45 an hour, right? You were expecting at the time that you entered this contract to work roughly 15 to 25 hours a week. Would you agree with that?
It could be more, or it could be less, but I was trying to stay within the frame, the number that Mr. Preston gave me.
Which you didn't contemplate at the time you entered this contract that it would be a full-time job. Is that fair?
At the beginning, when I submitted the $20 an hour, I thought it could possibly be, not knowing what hills I would have to climb.
And you would agree that this contract did not limit the number of hours you could work in a week, did it?
I don't believe it did.
If you look at the last page of the contract, I'm show it on the screen as well. I'm sorry, the last page of the appendix. And it just talks about, there's a section called normal working week. You see that?
Yes,
That indicates that the consultant, which is PAC, will work hours as required to meet the defined deliverables within the budgeted time. So it doesn't really limit your time on this contract, does it?
right.
And you figured, at one point you sat and figured out that health insurance for your family, including 4 kids, would cost you about $800 a month. Is that right?
Yes,
And if you were working an average of 20 hours a week, that's 80 hours a month, right? If you do 20 hours a week, 4 weeks a month, that's 80 hours. And in order to cover $800 a month for health insurance, you'd need an extra $800, correct?
yes,
So that'd be about a $10 an hour increase. If you're working 80 hours, would get you $800, wouldn't it?
yes,
So instead of a $10 an hour increase, your figure jumped from $20 an hour to $65 an hour, right?
yes.
Did Mr. Preston question the $65 an hour figure?
We discussed, as I stated earlier, I was under the assumption that I was going to have the full backing of the county, the resources and whatnot. If things needed to be done or something needed to be done last minute, that there would be somebody there. Just, it was a misunderstanding on my part.
And if you were working under your contract at $20 an hour and had the provision in there that allowed you to charge the county $20 an hour, whether it was you or any employee of yours to handle the work, couldn't you have had employees hired to do the same work that needed to be done and still got the $20 an hour for it?
Yes,
If you scale this up, and I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of math for me. If you figure $65 an hour